This summer I should be doing a big craft show, assuming that things get back to normal. I was supposed to do it last summer, but COVID. And I need a chair. And one thing that I've researched is that you don't want to be in a regular height chair at a craft show because people are in the booth are standing up, and having a conversation while you're sitting down when they're standing up close to you is awkward. So I could bring my stool here, but I want something with a back. And also, it's going to be at the front of my booth. It might be the first thing that people see, so I want it to represent me. So I'm going to have to make a chair, which I've never done before. The reason I've got this chair out here is because I find this chair to be comfortable, and so I'm going to kind of reference especially the back of this. So I found this Dudley chair, and I want to give credit to the designer. It's Van something or other. It's written, but it's an interesting chair. It sort of fits me. And I think it's suitable for being knocked down. To help things along, I've got this old seat from my parents' old dining set, which no one ever liked, apparently. The story from my dad is that the store only had this one set that he didn't entirely remember, but apparently they only had this one set that was suitable, and he didn't really like the chairs, but they bought it anyway. And these seats were never really comfortable. And I gave it the butt test, and still not comfortable. The thing I notice is most chairs I've seen that have a sculpted butt area, it's pretty much straight on the outside, whereas these like really taper in, and there's a ample butt cheek repository here, but then it gets really shallow in the leg area, so maybe this needs to be deeper too. So I'm going to have to work on this. And we'll go from there. I went right into the joinery between the back legs and the seat support rails before I even worked out the shape of the legs. I know what height the seat should be, so I know where the mortise needs to be, and it's easier to cut the joinery first. I'm not usually big on doing complicated joinery, but I'm doing a double mortise here. This is the one spot in the chair where I can really beef things up, and I feel like it, so that's what I'm doing. With the future sculpting of the legs, a lot of the material around the joint is going to be removed. So I want that mortise to be quite deep to get past that. The only long router bit I have is a 1/2 inch, which makes the mortises a little bigger than they should be for this width of stock. But I'm going to be adding some more strength to that later. Then I worked out the shape of the legs based on the location of the mortise, the backrest from measuring the comfy chair, and the end of the leg being as far back as possible. I wasn't too fussy about getting the curves perfect because after some small bandsaw jiu-jitsu to cut it out, I used my edge sander with its large drum that I built to really excel at smoothing out these kinds of gentle curves. Normally I cut tenons with one of my oldest jigs that rides on the table saw fence. Trying to do a double tenon with this would be a nightmare, so I set aside a couple of days to build Mortise's quick-set tenon jig. This allowed me to set up stops to make 4 repeatable cuts. Cutting into the wood in this orientation is hard on the saw, so this allowed me to make the cuts in 2 passes. The tenons fit pretty close on the first try, but they were 5 thou thicker at the back of the cut. I'm not sure why, but I could fix that more easily with the shoulder plane than I could figure out what was going on. When I did a test fit, I found that with the 2 rails aligned, the legs were not aligned. Didn't have a whole lot to register the leg with when I copied it, so this wasn't a huge surprise. However, I really should have waited until after the rail was glued to adjust them, as I ended up having to go through this process again to a lesser degree after the glue up. There's an angled dado on the rails that the front leg assembly will slide into. Because I made the rails out of offcuts for making the legs, they don't have parallel edges. For some reason, I didn't just make a spacer to support one, and instead decided to mirror the whole setup. In doing so, I managed to misalign the 2 dados. To fix this, I recut the shoulders on one rail. Starting on the front legs, I have the stock temporarily attached together so I can mock it up and cut it to length with a 5-degree bevel. This second cut at the bottom is pretty dicey. The first leg went okay, but I could tell the second leg wasn't going to work and stopped. I rigged up a clamped-on outrigger to make it stable enough to complete the cut. I needed to notch the front legs to fit into those dados. To get the size of the notch, I milled up some stock that is going to go between the 2 rear legs so I could get a measurement. The cut at the bottom of the notch is angled, so this is one of those ultra rare occasions where I make use of the ability of the bandsaw table to tilt a little bit in the opposite direction. I really hate it when that happens. I need to know how high up to put the front stretcher, so can one of you be a pal and get down where you can see, and time travel back to when this actually happened? Thanks. Now I could draw the legs, and I want to trim back where it meets the stretcher, but still have a nice straight edge. So I raise the blade up through the wood at the table saw. Skipping to the glue up, the wedges on the outside kept the horizontal clamps from slipping upward, and the vertical clamps kept the stretchers from being pushed down. I thought I would make my life easier by doing butt joints and reinforcing them with dowels after the fact. So here I am showing off my badass freehand drilling skills. It's a little less badass when that happens though. And once I cut out the stretcher to replace it, the other side wasn't a whole lot better either. So I patched up the holes with dowels and then re-drilled. This time with some help getting them started straight from a dowel jig. But because of the curve of the leg, it's kind of far off and I can't drill very deep with it. I'll do. I wanted to reduce the weight of the back legs, so after removing most of the material with a Forstner bit, I did some template routing. But somehow the bit managed to cut deeper than the template. A little investigation showed the bearing was loose and able to ride up over the top of the template, because the set screw in the collar came loose. So to clean that up, I had to enlarge the template and make another pass. You aren't supposed to bottom out a router bit in the collet because supposedly that can prevent the collet from tightening all the way. But this time I bottomed that sucker out. There wasn't much wall thickness left after that, and this is the weakest part of the leg due to the grain orientation through the curve. There's still a lot of meat left in the leg, but I decided to reinforce the walls with a thin strip. Guys, listen up for a minute. Now, we've been making a lot of sloppy mistakes in this build. It's got to stop. I'm not talking about you, Drill. That was all on me, man. You just went where I pointed you. Maybe some of you guys are still agitated about the shop rearrangement. Whatever the problem is, let's put it behind us. Now, we fixed these legs. Now, they're lighter and stronger than we even planned on them being. But the build isn't over yet. So let's keep our heads in the build and get this done. All right? From just the right angle, you can see the divots from the pilots of the Forstner bit, so I covered those up with a thin piece. I want to connect the front stretcher to the back legs, but this joint is going to have to come apart. That front to back stretcher would be vulnerable to breaking when the chair is disassembled. So I'm adding in this piece that will connect it up to the seat rails. Now when the chair is together, this link is redundant, so I struggled a bit on how to make this extra part look like it belongs there. This bottom curve would be really weak because of the grain orientation. So I cut in a slot so I could glue in a piece with the grain going the opposite way. As a testament to how weak it was, it broke during the glue up. I don't want the fastener to come in from the front. I want it to go together without any tools, so there would have to be a knob sticking out the front, and I just think that would look weird. So I'm adding on a flange, and I will make that look like the other sculpted transitions. It's like the 12th time that clamp has fallen off. Don't fall off. Don't fall off. I'm tapping threads into the wood. I think this will hold up fine, but if not, it's my chair and I'll fix it. To make my life easier, I decided to use that comfy chair as a bending form for the backrest. This wasn't ideal as the backrest has a taper to it, so I couldn't use my parallel clamps. A fact that I discovered after I had enthusiastically already applied the glue while admiring my cleverness for having come up with this idea. This next shot was intended to show how much springback there was, which was not much. But you can also see that the backrest has quite a twist to it. And I think the chair's backrest has some twist also, but I also had the second glue up at a bit of an angle for a while, which didn't help matters. I ended up sanding as much as I could without going through the first layer of the lamination to try to take as much of the twist out as I could. I had to fit the back legs to the curve of the backrest, and here I am trying to be a proper woodworker and do it with a hand plane. But that lasted not a whole lot longer than what I'm showing you here before I went for a power tool. Now the chair just wouldn't be complete without one more thing going wrong. So of course a simple roundover has a huge chip out. So that ended up being a bigger roundover than I planned on. The final machining step was to put a cove on the bottom edge of the seat at the table saw. I had to use a slightly curved fence to fit the slight concavity of the sides. This made the seat look lighter, but also weigh noticeably less. Yep, it's a chair.